How's it going, everyone? So this is going to be a video that's kind of about this mower, but not really. It's about finding out how to restore spark. So it's a little bit of a how-to. In fact, it is a how-to. And while this is a Honda, this is going to work for basically any small engine, whether it be on a lawnmower, generator, other generator, even that chainsaw to a certain degree. So let's go ahead and sit down, talk, and see what we have to do to restore that spark. So this is what is called an ignition coil. So basically what happens is there is a flywheel that will spin, and there's a magnet on that flywheel, and the gap in between this area and this area is supposed to be within 10,000ths of an inch. Now that's important, we'll get back to that. But anyway, assuming that the gapping is right, when it spins, the magnet is going to cause the coil to turn that magnetism into electric energy, and then it sends that energy to the spark plug, creates spark, combustion, and then the whole thing repeats itself. Locate your coil. Now, it's always going to be under the pull cord. Pull the pull cord off. In this situation, you actually just have to remove the whole cover, and that's it. And let's go ahead and do that now. And here we have it. This is the flywheel I was talking about. If you take like I don't know, anything metal, and then put it around, you can see that there's a magnet right there. Which brings us to the first thing you need to check. When you're trying to determine if it has good or no spark, or figuring out why it doesn't have spark, it kind of goes without saying, but when it needs a magnetism and the magnet, if the magnet isn't working, then that's your problem right there. A lot of videos seem to forego that part. It happens very rarely, usually when it gets overheated, and even then I don't really know how it gets that heated, but magnets, you know, they can fail. So that's the easiest one to check. I usually check that one first. Next, disconnect. This is what kills spark. So let me explain what that means. Right now, this, if you were to turn it on, will not shut off. It will not shut off because when the coil isn't grounded, it's going to be sparking. Now when you turn the machine off, it grounds the coil. So right now, if for any reason your wire had like a bear mark in it, or excuse me, wear mark, and it's grounding out to somewhere on the motor, it's not going to work. So first thing you want to check is your cable. Well, I guess the second thing you want to check now is your cable. And if your cable has any type of wear on it, especially next to anything metallic, then you're going to want to either replace that or repair it. Electrical tape if you need to in a pinch, ideally shrink tubing, you know, whatever you have available. You look at your cable, you disconnected it. How do you know that was the problem? When you disconnect it, if you spin it and you have constant spark, guess what? You know it was probably the cable. If you disconnect the cable, if you reconnect the cable, spin it again, and it kills spark, that means your cable is probably bad. There's a caveat to that. This has a switch. Majority of the time, it's just literally like a mechanical connection. There's like a wire that's connected to like some type of insulated holder, and then when you let go of the cable or the bail in the machine, a metallic arm that's grounded to the machine will come in contact and then will ground it out. Sometimes, as in this Honda, you will have an actual switch. So if you have a switch, mine is right here, you very well could have a bad switch. It could just be constantly grounded, which wouldn't be the best thing in the world, hence that's the reason why we're here. So if you have a switch, disconnecting the cable could also be a sign that your switch is going bad. But if you don't have a switch, just make sure that the isolating material that they have for your mechanical switch isn't worn or broken. So basically, if you disconnect this, whatever is the problem has got to be somewhere here. You can replace the whole thing, you can try to repair it, whatever you want to do. You just need to make sure that you do so. So you disconnected it, still has no spark. Then what do? I would measure the gap or even re-gap it. You can go to the hardware store or automotive store, basic would probably be a better idea, and get something called a feeler gauge. Feeler gauge is a collection of just metal, tiny little gauges that just have like different thicknesses on them. You need to find one that is 10,000ths of an inch. Or a lot of people say a business card thickness. That's fine. If you have a piece of printer paper, you could fold it like about half, maybe even 4 times, depending on the thickness of the paper, and shove it in there. So you loosen these 2 screws, you move it out, put the paper in between the coil and the flywheel, and then you spin it until the magnet, which is right here, is right about there. The magnet's going to then suck the coil up, and then it will reconnect that before I forget. It will have a proper gapping. You tighten the screws, you spin the flywheel over again, remove the paper or your business card or your feeler gauge, whatever it is, and that's it. Done. Spin it over again. Here's a little side note too. If you're spinning it because you took off the recoil and you're using a drill, be careful, because unless you're having like a special ratchet on here, the likelihood of you letting go on your drill and it's coming to a sudden abrupt stop is pretty high, and that could be a little bit of a annoying thing. It might hurt your wrists, stuff like that. Anyway, so now we have knowledge that our kill system is working properly, our gap is working properly, our magnet is working properly, and if you have regained spark, that's it. If you have not regained spark, then unfortunately you're pretty much left with only the coil being bad. Now that's really not that big of a problem except for time. The reason why I say that is this: coils are cheap. OEM ones can be a little bit more expensive, don't get me wrong, but even aftermarket ones seem to be doing pretty well. I don't really have any problems with them. And to be honest, they rarely go out, so it's kind of odd for me to see if one is going out, but it can happen. What you can do is you could go on the Aeronet and look up the resistance values for your coil, get a multimeter, set it to ohms, and there's a series of ways you're supposed to check it. To be honest, if what we've done already is not working, it's going to be the coil. Now, some people say you have to clean the rust off. That's a fabrication. Magnetism doesn't give a crap about rust, so don't worry about it. Another thing to check is where your spark plug actually connects to the coil in the boot. If it's rusty and corroded, or if your plug is rusty and corroded at its end, then that's a bad connection and you're not going to get spark. Ideally, I'm hoping you understand that we need to have a good plug for this. If it's new, that's better. If it's not new, maybe check a different one just to make sure. But I would hope that everyone understands it needs to have a good plug, because if the plug's bad, you're never going to have spark, and everything we're doing right now is just not needed. So, you buy your coil. You do the exact same thing. You replace it by taking the 2 screws out, put the correct gap, and then give it a try. Word of caution: when you buy a coil, sometimes they will, if you buy the OEM one, look at the orientation. This one has a fat box on the top of it and not so much on the bottom. Some of them are a lot different, especially if they're newer. They're a lot more, I don't want to say advanced, but these are older, so they're just going to be a little bit bigger, at least on this one. But pay attention to how it is mounted, or if your coil has writing on it that says this end up or cylinder side or something. Pay attention to that, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to put it upside down, because it can. It's very easily to put it on upside down. If you put it on upside down, you're going to be a little bit off time. Not a whole lot, but you're going to be at the very least down on some power, and potentially you can do something called a kickback. Kickback is when you pull on the pull cord and then it kind of ignites the mixture in the cylinder before you're really expecting it, and kind of pulls the pull cord out of your hand, and that is not fun. So you don't want to put it on backwards. I know that sounds scary, but trust me, if you're buying the OEM one, just make sure you're putting it on the same way. If you're buying the aftermarket one, they almost always have some type of marking on them showing you what side they need to be on. And there you go. Now, this is not to be confused with anything with the points and condenser. That's a completely different style of system, different issues in of itself. So if you have a very old machine and you have a points and condenser, then don't follow. You can still follow some of this, don't get me wrong, but you're going to have a lot more problems potentially. 99% of the time it just needs to be cleaned or adjusted, but you know, that's 99%. It's not 100. Get what I mean? I will say though, if you're sure if you have a points and condenser system, ask yourself a couple questions. How old is my machine? Anything made in the late 80s, definitely in the 90s, and most definitely in the 2000s and earlier or later, will not have a points and condenser. It's going to have just a normal coil, or magneto, or whatever you want to call it. So if you're at that weird little age range when you're kind of wondering if you do, there will be a wire going from what looks like your coil to underneath somewhere in the underneath the flywheel. If you have that wire, you have a points and condenser system, because basically what we were looking at, this does all in one contained box. The points and condenser cannot. It actually has something that looks very, very, very similar to that, and then a condenser, which is kind of like a big capacitor. Well, that's pretty simplified to say the least. And then points. There's a little cam on your crank that kind of moves the arm back and forth, and then once it touches, kind of signals the ability to, initiate spark. We're getting beyond the focus of this video though, so if you have a points and condenser, just know that you're probably going to have a little bit more problems, so keep that in mind. But I will say though, almost always if you have a points and condenser on something that isn't super weird and rare, like if you have like some, I don't know, World War II old generator that hasn't been made in the last 50 years or something, then you're probably going to be able to find a aftermarket coil that will fit just fine, and you won't have to worry about the points and condenser. If that's the case, then just cut it off, put the new one on, you're golden. So keep that in mind as well. I know some people don't like that idea. I do it all the time on older Briggs & Strattons, like usually like the 70s or early 80s. I will almost only do that because it's just, in my opinion, a better system. It's more reliable. You don't have to worry about it as much. Just a better idea. So if you don't have any spark, follow these rules. Check the magnet first. Check the kill. Whatever system you have, make sure it's not grounding out anywhere. If you're unaware how to use a multimeter, simple disconnecting the wire and then reconnecting it, seeing if it kills it, stops it, doesn't change, perfect. And if all that doesn't work, buy a new one. You don't have to get fancy. You don't have to really check it out. There's really not a whole lot more it could go wrong with that, so not really difficult. All you really just need to do is just pay attention and just follow these steps, and you should be ready to go. I'm going to leave you at that. Follow me at Instagram at SmallEngine101. If you like what you see, keep watching, subscribe. Definitely put a thumbs up if this helped you out. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I'll be happy to help. Or join the members area. One of the perks is personalized help. So I will catch you there. Have a good night.